Well, according to the Centers for Disease Control, approximately 72.5 million U.S. adults are obese. That's roughly 1/4 of this entire country. And with this problem comes discrimination. That's right, weight discrimination. That is when someone is denied access to employment, for example, or housing or public facilities and more simply because of their weight. Joining us today to discuss this sad but true trend is our favorite attorney, Areva Martin. She joins us as part of our My Empowerment series. Areva, thank you for coming back to the Balancing Act this morning.
Always my pleasure, Danielle.
It's my pleasure to have you here this morning because this is something that I don't think a lot of people actually think about. What exactly is weight discrimination?
You know, plain and simply, it's being treated differently because of your size. And unfortunately, in this country, millions and millions of individuals, mostly women, experience some form of weight discrimination, either employment, housing, or public access, even, visiting a restaurant or attempting to visit a club. We've all heard stories about, women lining up outside of, quote unquote, hot nightclubs and bouncers coming out selecting the thin, pretty girls.
That's a form of weight discrimination.
That's a form of physical discrimination based on someone's weight, based on someone's appearance. And it happens all the time.
What are some other examples?
Applying for a job. I see lots of women in my law practice who come in and say, I went in for a job. I had the perfect resume. I had the credentials. I had the experience. But I knew when that employer looked at me and I was, not the perfect size, that I wasn't going to get that job. So it happens even in the hiring process.
All right, so let's say a man goes in and he's overweight and he goes in to apply for this job, and let's say a woman goes in to apply for the very same job. Do you find that women are more apt to be discriminated against because of their weight than men?
That's a good question. But as it relates to weight discrimination, I don't think it matters. The statistics tells us that it doesn't matter whether you're a man or a woman. If you're overweight, the chances are you may be discriminated against simply because of how you look. It doesn't have anything to do with your ability, your know-how, your expertise, just on how you look.
Well, can that be a little bit of a slippery slope? Because just like when you have, you feel like you've been discriminated against because of your gender or because of your race, how do you know that you're being discriminated against because of your weight?
Well, trust me, a lot of overweight people will tell you they've either had comments made, they've had snide remarks, they've had derogatory comments, and they've had people just tell them, we don't want someone like you in our job. You don't fit the description of the person we want in this particular position. So it's not always subtle.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So let's say that someone does feel that they've been discriminated against because of their weight. What can they do?
Well, fortunately, there's at least one state, Michigan, has enacted laws that prohibit discrimination against individuals because of their weight. And there are many cities throughout the country that have municipal codes that also prohibit that kind of discrimination. I encourage people to call their state Department of Employment and find out what their state laws are. Unfortunately, the federal government has not made weight a protected class. Like you mentioned, Danielle, being discriminated against because of your age, because of your gender, because of your race. Weight isn't one of those classes. So right now, it's impossible to file a federal lawsuit alleging weight discrimination.
Do you find that this is getting more attention because more and more Americans are obese? Because it's interesting when you hear the statistics that I talked about at the top of the piece, more people are overweight, and so would that then mean that there'll be more people who are discriminated against?
People are talking about it more. You may have seen a recent news article about a woman that worked at a restaurant, and she was told in her performance evaluation that her uniform was too tight, and they actually offered her a gym membership and talked about things that she needed to do to change her physical appearance, and really what they were saying is, you're too fat. With the internet and with social media sites, we're seeing more and more people talking about it very openly, and it's painful. It's very painful, and it's illegal.
The other thing I think about, before we wrap here, is you talk about, social media.
Yes.
We talk about Facebook and Twitter and all of these things. And it almost seems to me, Areva, like people feel like they have a license to say what they want to say when you can't see them. And so when you see on Facebook somebody saying no fat people, apply, would they really say that to somebody's face?
Unfortunately, many people will, and they feel like they can do it with impunity, and we're seeing it more and more. But what I want people to know is they need to be empowered. They need to take these kinds of comments and this kind of behavior very seriously. If you're in a workplace and you feel as if you're being treated differently because of your weight or your size, go to your boss, approach them, make them aware of it. Even though there may not be a federal law that prohibits that kind of discrimination, no company wants the reputation of discriminating against or treating people fairly differently because of their weight or size. So I encourage people, bring it to the attention of the powers that be. If you're in a restaurant and you see the thin people are getting in and you're not getting seated, go to that manager, and stand up for yourself and say, I've been here for 15 minutes or 30 minutes and I notice all the thin people are getting in, but I'm not, being given the same level of treatment. And when you stand up for yourself, I think people will start to act differently. Yeah,
it's a real issue that a lot of people deal with. And so thank you so much for bringing it to our attention today. As always, what a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Always good to be back, Danielle.
And we will see you again, Areva Martin. Thanks.
Thank you.
And if you'd like more information on weight discrimination or Areva Martin, you can visit the website, arevamartin.com.